Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. It's wonderful to have Dr. Angela Cortellessa back, and we have a really special guest today. It is Yasuhiko Kimura. So really looking forward to this. Take it away, Angela.
Thank you, Shrikant. Yes, I completely agree. I'm really excited today. We do have a very special guest. But before we dive into that, if anybody is new here, I just want to quickly introduce myself and the topic before we begin our chat with Yasuhiko. So yeah, my name is Dr. Angela Cortellessa. In 2018, I finished my doctoral degree in human and organizational learning at George Washington University. And as you know, when you get a doctoral degree, you have to do research and write a dissertation. And I decided to do my dissertation on modern day polymaths, which is kind of a fancy word for like a Renaissance man or woman, someone with broad, varied skills and expertise and experiences across disciplines, kind of people who break out of the box of specialization. I do want to provide an official definition of polymathy as well as an introduction before we dive in. This is a definition by Robert and Michelle Root Bernstein, and I consider Bob the leading thinker on polymathy studies. And they said that polymathy is active engagement in multiple interests or endeavors, integrating vocations with avocations simultaneously or serially across the lifespan. That's a pretty good definition. I also want to add that polymathy exists on a spectrum in my view. It's not as if you must be a Leonardo da Vinci in order to consider yourself a polymathic person. And I'll say too that some people don't feel comfortable calling themselves a polymath. So, you know, if you think that the most accomplished polymaths are the polymath type people, and you're not quite as eminent, okay, then what I would encourage you to do is use it as an adjective. Say, I'm polymathic, and use it as a descriptor rather than a designation, like you've arrived finally. Okay, so those are a few things I want to mention about what polymathy is. And today, we are going to be focusing on how polymathy can be a means to explore and reveal your most authentic self, and how doing that helps you become the best possible version of yourself as you aspire towards self-actualization. And the reason Yasuhiko is here is because I really consider him, I mean, whenever I think of Yasuhiko, I think of the authentic self. And the way I know him is because we both used to live in Charlottesville. Currently, we both live in the Washington, D.C. area, but a few years back, we both lived in the Charlottesville, Virginia area. One day I was looking at a local newspaper and he was on the cover about a seminar he was going to be offering. It looked really good, so I signed up. And then I realized what a gem I had found, you know, in terms of someone with really deep thoughts. And I ended up signing up for another series of courses with him. And he's been very influential on my thinking, which led to my research and my writing on polymathy, because really and I don't want to give away too much because we're going to be diving into this further, but I really believed what Yasuhiko said, which is that one of the most important things we're here to do is to reveal our authentic selves. What could be more important than actually being your true self while you're here on planet Earth? And it occurred to me after I got out of that class and got into my doctoral program that maybe one of the ways to reveal your most authentic self is through broad experience and exposure, and deep experiences too. And his thinking has definitely impacted my research and my thinking in this field. So there's my introduction of how I know Yasuhiko. And Yasuhiko, would you please give us a little bio, like tell us about yourself, tell us about what you do, what you're passionate about, what services you offer, just anything you'd like to tell us about who you are.
Thank you, Angela. So my name is Yasuhiko Genku Kimura. I'm originally from Japan, and the first profession I had was a Zen Buddhist priest. As all teenagers do, I was really deeply troubled by the question of who I was and what the purpose of my life was. And 2 days before my 16th birthday, I had a kind of a cosmic epiphany. And I came to realize that the purpose of my life, human life, purpose of actually existence as such is to be. And we are ongoing being, therefore our purpose is already fulfilled. But when we begin to be ourselves, we start to become more and more of ourselves. And I realized from that perspective, I realized that the society and the schooling system that I was in, they were trying to make you somebody.
Yeah.
And nobody is telling you to be who you are. And I felt the kind of being an outsider to the system, and began to seek people who share the same kind of perspective. That's when I met a few Zen masters. I had read books on Zen, including very ancient scriptures, but these Zen masters are very unique, and they really intrigued me. So I became a Zen monk, and I had monastic training, seminary training, academic training, and I became ordained Zen Buddhist priest in my early 20s. Then they sent me to India, where Shrikant is from. We may have actually met in a local cafe in Bombay, drinking chai next to each other. And my perspective expanded tremendously. I read a lot of books. That's how I kind of learned English for the second time. And I realized that ancient mode of teaching to contemporary humans are inherently limited. So after I returned to Japan, I thanked my Zen masters and Zen organizations for providing me with an excellent opportunity to study. But I left the organization. Officially, I'm still a Zen Buddhist priest. I found out my name is still there, but I'm not practicing. And I met a number of people while I was in India from US. So I decided to just visit United States. That's when I began to read more of Western philosophy. And I became extremely impressed with the founding fathers of the United States and their philosophical background. And we are talking about polymath. Virtually every one of founding father was a polymath. Most of them are autodidactic. And their philosophy is surprisingly very close to, well, originally I think their philosophy came from Epicurus and Lucretius, and then Bruno, Spinoza, and all the way to John Locke and many other British philosophers, and some are Scottish, then came to the United States. But Spinoza's idea is very similar to Eastern mode of thinking, theologically speaking. And when they say pursuit of happiness, in the most essential sense, is the pursuit of self-realization. And they say basis of happiness is virtue. When they say virtue, its closest terminology we can use today is being authentic.
Wow.
This all comes from the concept of conatus. Spinoza used this term. It is the power within to make you more and more. So it is a power within ourselves to realize ourselves. So virtue is to live in accordance with conatus, which means to be authentic. And happiness is the result of that pursuit. which is self-realization. And one more thing that really impressed me is that in the East, India, China, Japan, and Korea, and all those Buddhist and Hindu cultures, we have achieved moksha, inner freedom. The society has never been free. And founding fathers with profound philosophical background and reflection and understanding not only achieved a measure of inner freedom, but they have also created a society that provide an opportunity and a guarantee for people to be free. That was very unique. So I decided to become American. And so I became a naturalized American citizen. And ever since, I have been basically teaching philosophy outside of the system, offering courses to adults in the art of thinking. And I have been consulting businesses, CEOs in the art of thinking and being authentic. Because to be authentic is an essential component of being able to think. You know, we think, but we don't think. Famous German philosopher, Martin Heidegger, said, the most thought-provoking thing in this most thought-provoking time is that we are not thinking. So, going back to your polymathy, you can, so long as you are pursuing being somebody in the system, people will ask you, demand you to be specialized. Because to achieve some status in this society and be successful, you become successful in some field. The whole education system is based on specialization. And becoming somebody means you're an expert or the best in some field. You say doctorate, PhD, doctor of philosophy, but actually you're a doctor of something more specialized than philosophy. So to pursue polymathy uniquely in your life is to be you and to become more and more you and pursue your curiosity, natural curiosity, beyond. I'm not denying the necessity of having a successful career in society, but beyond. That's why the definition that you gave of the polymathy is beautiful. Mm-hmm. It is combining vocation and avocation.
Yep.
So you live your life in the context of fulfilling your passion, authentic passion, and authentic self. And you pursue your intellectual curiosity beyond your specialization. Even within your specialization, if you want to know something really, you have to go deep. And this depth also involves, with many other dimensions. You may know the man named Georgy Gurdjieff, one of the greatest spiritual philosophers of the 20th century. He said this: to know is to know all. Not to know all is not to know at all. And in order to know all, you only need to know a little. But to know that little, you need to know a lot. That is the polymathy and spiritual specialization put together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm extremely interested in your work, and we are very much aligned.
Definitely.
And I don't think you see I have studied two people who are called 20th century Da Vinci, Walter Russell and Buckminster Fuller. They are, well, let's see. Walter Russell was born in 1871. Buckminster Fuller was born in 1895. Walter Russell died in 1961, and Buckminster Fuller died in 1983. Long life. And they explored wide variety of fields and integrated into their work. And but why? Neither one of them had any formal education, really, to speak of. Walter Russell left school when he was 10 years old. There was a reversal of fortune of the family, so he needed to work. Buckminster Fuller was kicked out of Harvard University twice. So they pursued their own intellectual interest. So, and all the polymath whom I have known, regardless of whether or not they have any academic training, they are all autodidact because they pursue their intellectual interest, which means they are free in their consciousness to pursue what they are interested in knowing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Yasuhiko, thank you so much for all of those gems you just presented. And by the way, Yasuhiko mentioned that he offers seminars and consulting, and I've taken seminars with him multiple times, and I just want to recommend them to anybody who likes what you're hearing, and if you want to follow up, I highly recommend his courses. And real quick, I didn't do this earlier, but I just want to give you a idea of how the session is going to go today. Yasuhiko and I are going to keep chatting for another 40 minutes or so. Then Shrikant wants to chat with him too, because we have such a special guest. And then we're going to do Q&A. And if you want to share any takeaways, you can do so then. If we have time, we'll do breakout rooms today, but we might not have time for that. So that's how it's going to go. Okay, where should I go with my next question? Okay, Yasuhiko, as you said, we live in a time that prizes specialization, even hyper specialization. And if we follow that narrative for our lives, if we focus narrowly and don't consider the importance of breadth of experience and learning, what do you think that does to our ability to be authentic and to explore the fullness of our capacities and to reach towards specialization if we stick with the specialization approach? What's the cost?
Yes. Society as a system has no interest in your authentic self. And it is interested in its own survival and thrival. And see, so we have a nature and culture. And you are conceived and you are born. There's a totally natural process. The moment you are born, you enter into a culture and society. So you become not only natural, but a cultural being. And in the natural process, when you are born, you as a hardware and operating system, while sharing with other humans the basic structure, each one has a unique design. And so your software operating system with which you are born has uniqueness to it, which is irreplaceable by any other human being. So part of being authentic is to actually grow and evolve as this, I'm using computer analogy, hardware, software growing. But what happens is when you are born, society will actually input forcefully their own collective software. And you learn using that operating system, not your own operating system. Of course, it is used to a degree, but it is not really fully. And in one sense, it is inevitable because the first part of our growth process, we actually have to mimic, imitate. It's mimetic. We learn by imitating parents and other people. But in the process, the original software is completely disregarded. That is one of the problems we have today. So by the time you become 7 years old or 14 years old, by the time you finish university at the age of 21, 22, people become homogenized and operating on the collective, unindividualized software operating system. We call this hive mind, herd mentality, so that you become a useful cog in the whole machine, machination of society. And one part of this homogenization is actually specialization into a particular field. There are 8,000 academic disciplines taught in the universities today. 8,000. And you and I were talking, previously. I know a person who is a medical doctor who is specialized in surgery on right hand only. So somebody needs a surgery on the left hand, the person needs another specialist. That's a heavy specialization.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yes. And and you see, the amount of information that we need to acquire in each specialty is so huge that most people don't have time studying anything else. And once you become specialized and become successful doctor, you have ongoing, flow of patients. So you become really this.
Mm-hmm.
So going back, we need to go back to the law of nature and nature's God. By the way, nature's God is the best translation for the term Tao.
Mm.
In my translation, I didn't use it, but if I have to use something, I will use that word. That's closest to what Tao means in Chinese. But anyway, so law of nature and the law of nature's God has been ignored. And the law of nature and the law of nature's God is this conatus, the power, which Nietzsche calls will to power. It is a natural will and power of will to wanting to be yourself and evolve as yourself. And that part of ourselves has been suppressed, repressed, and eventually completely forgotten.
Mm.
And people think they think, but they actually run the program. In Japanese, we call to think kangaeru, kamikaeru, which means to return to the God within. To think means to return to the God within, and God returning to this world. Which means you get to your authentic self and let this authentic self express itself. That is to me what it means to think. That aspect of thinking has been suppressed. And people who are polymathy somehow maintained something of their unique individual design in the original operating system. And even under the pressure of society, they have maintained this. Another thing is, when you become specialized, you become ignorant of other dimensions of life because you ignore them. You're kind of compelled to ignore them, therefore you become ignorant. And it is very good for the system if the people who run the system, I don't want to go into conspiracy theories, but there are people who are running the system. And look, if you have a conspiracy theory, if you have a conspiracy, okay, you involve many people to do something. It is better that the one faction of the person doesn't know what other people are doing, so they don't know the whole picture. So in a way, this whole society is structured like a conspiracy where few people run this whole thing, and people who are involved are specialized, and they don't know the whole picture. They only know what they're doing. And to do this, they give you a PhD, MD, JD, you become CEO, or whatever it is, you get status. In exchange for status, you give up your polymathic nature, which is a human nature. Yeah. So to be a polymathic requires a degree of courage.
Yes.
It goes together, and you see, a degree of courage. And what is courage? Courage is a mastery of fear. Most people run by fear. The people who become courageous, they master fear. What happens when fear is mastered? It becomes intellectual curiosity. Because fear is always fear of unknown. So it is always the experience of the unknown that can cause fear. But if you transform this fear in the face of the unknown, that actually becomes intellectual curiosity.
That's a great point.
Yes. And that is courage. So people who are courageous, intellectually especially, they are very curious people. And when you're curious, what happens? You ask questions. And how the society suppresses your curiosity and your polymathic tendency is to suppress your questions. Babies, you have 4.5-year-old baby or child, not only baby, I don't think. I'm sure she asks all kinds of questions.
Yeah.
And the parents usually kind of suppress it. And then when you go to school, teachers monopolize the question and the answer. And when you have a real good questions, they ignore it. So you stop asking questions because asking questions has no reward. Memorizing the question and answer has a reward.
Right.
Eventually, you become a PhD and MDs. I'm not putting down PhDs. I'm speaking to one PhD, whom I know very well. And I actually one of the people I supported you in getting degrees, because of your intelligence and stuff. So I'm not putting them down, but you see, it become like a bait.
Mm-hmm.
So that is where we need to be in touch with the law of nature and nature's God and Tao of our being, and continue to satisfy our own connators, will to power, the power to self-realize. And in that context, you can hold society within, and you strategically place yourself in society so that you don't starve to death, to become, and you can support your family.
Yasuhiko, I have a follow-up question to that.
Yes.
The law of nature. I don't know. I thought of evolution when you said that to some, that came up in my mind. As you know, there's this book called The Phenomenon of Man. And one of Teilhard, who wrote the book, one of the things he said as he studied the patterns of evolution is that a common theme in evolution, whatever creature or plant you're looking at, is increased individuation.
Mm-hmm.
He also said, in addition to increased individuation as the evolutionary urge,
Mm-hmm.
there's also increased cooperation amongst those differentiated parts.
Mm-hmm.
And when I hear individuation, I can't help but think of polymathy. And it makes me wonder, is expressing our polymathic nature part of what evolves us as a species? What do you think?
Yeah, individuality and indivisibility come from the same root. So being an individual is to achieve indivisible wholeness of being. Becoming a specialist is a fragmentation of your own consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So being a polymath, uniquely in your own way, is to become, it's a sign of you becoming more and more an individual. So individual differentiation is the direction of evolution. But when you become individual, you become more and more integrated, because it is the indivisibility of the wholeness of your being that grows and evolves. So when you study a very evolved human beings, they are very unique.
Mm-hmm.
When you listen to Beethoven, you know it is Beethoven. In a Baroque music, they are very similar, but still when you listen to Handel, Bach, Vivaldi, for the first time even, you get the sense it is Bach, it is Handel, it is Vivaldi. And so when you listen to Beethoven, he's one of my most favorite composers. I have listened to every piece that he ever composed. Around the age of 28, he becomes Beethoven. He becomes Beethoven. After that, you know it is Beethoven. Until then, it can be Mozart. There's element of that element, Handel, Haydn. I'm sorry, Haydn. There's a lot of similarity to Haydn until the age of 20, 25, 28. After that, it's entirely Beethoven. So he has achieved an individuation. Yeah. Now, he also, in the phenomenon man, he also talked about oneness. There are two kinds of oneness. One oneness is actually unique. So when you become more and more individual, you become one as you. Therefore, you become unique. And oneness grows and become more and more one, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, you begin to have the sense of the whole more and more. You see the connection with the whole that is larger than you, which is experienced as your world.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Yasuhiko, I think a lot of people, a lot of the polymaths I've spoken to, there's a sort of self-consciousness they have about really stepping into that and owning that and leveraging it fully because of the dominant narratives that we receive, saying, no, no, be specialized, be expert, do this one thing, focus on that, don't be distracted or unfocused, or some of the bad narratives they tell about polymathy. But what I feel, as if I hear you saying, is that actually by expressing your ownliness, by exploring your truest authentic self, that you actually help the collective. You help the collective evolve.
Yeah, no question. Yes. You see, now human beings are very complex. And we do have what is called negative emotions. And one of the most destructive negative emotions people have, not everybody. Everybody experiences jealousy. Very few actually experience envy. And the envy, Ayn Rand defined envy as the hatred of the good for being the good. Jealousy is an emotion that affirms value. You have something, I don't have it, but I don't deny the value you have. I want to have it. I can't have it. But you are not denying the value you want to have, you don't have. Envy is an emotion which actually denies the value itself. And envy is very prevalent in the society. And what happens? People, polymathic people are, generally speaking, naturally more gifted than others. Which means you become the object of envy. So if you become an object of envy, it is tough life in society. So what happens? You begin to develop envy deflection device as part of your personality. So somebody who is extremely intelligent, they become funny or self-effactive or humble, whatever that is. Somehow you don't want to become a part of envy. And so you, Shrikant, and your audience, gifted people, you may be able to actually identify with yourself the envy deflection device that you have developed within yourself. Somehow you don't want to offend people because you're gifted. Yeah. And so that's one of the things that prevent people from openly gifted, openly polymathic. Again, it is a culture and society. So you want to free yourself from this envy deflection device that we have developed as a part of your personality. And luckily, I had that experience when I was very young. And so I said to people, you may have heard this, I say to my students, what other people think of you is none of your business. Really.
Yeah.
Not my original statement, but I say that because you have zero control over what other people think of you. You do everything possible to be liked by somebody, but still that person may dislike you. And nothing to do with you, actually. You trigger something that is within them, so they like you or they dislike you. It's amazing. Any emotional reaction, it doesn't come from the present moment. It comes from the past experiences. So you're intelligent, highly intelligent, and that people have an emotional envy. You kind of represent it, but it has really nothing to do with it personally. you seem to represent something. So this freedom from envy diffraction device, and actually the freedom from what the concern for what other people think of you, Gurujev called this internal consideration, is essential for gifted people, polymath, to master. It's another form of courage.
Mhm.
It's courage to be who you are. So it is beyond intellectual curiosity or intellectual courage to know what you don't know, but also courage to be who you are, regardless of what other people think of you.
Absolutely.
Question is, what you think of yourself?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
That's the only thing you have any control over anyway.
Yep. Yeah. So Yasuhiko, I'm hearing you say that, we live in this society that doesn't particularly care for us becoming our best selves. They care for us to be efficient, to contribute to the machine.
Mhm.
But if we want to be our best individual selves, if we want to be free, we need to be curious, we need to be brave. We need to not care so much what other people think, or if we make them envious somehow. We have to step into our fullest capacities. Do you have any other advice for people who are wanting to do that, to unleash their authentic self, who are wanting to unleash their fullest capacity? Any other advice for someone who wants to be brave and do that?
Okay. There are a few things that we can actually do. One is what Sri Kant is doing. We are a minority. We are in the minority.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us are completely alone. Maybe all of us have experienced at one time or another being totally alone, not being understood or appreciated for who we are.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, being criticized.
Mm-hmm.
So it is, we can actually design a community together. Right now, we are limited in terms of a meeting online only. How do I live in Manhattan? I mean, I had lived in Manhattan before. How do I know him? I would have joined him and had a nice conversation together. His group. My wife and I almost started the Socratic Cafe in Manhattan. Yeah. So something like that, and that can lead into something.
Mm.
But first, we want to come together.
Yeah. Can I give a quick plug? I have a Facebook group called Polymath's Place and a website and a YouTube channel and who knows what other forms or fashions it may take in the years to come. But I want to say I am attempting to create community for people like this.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
And second, they're all interrelated. Second thing is to be a polymathy, also polymath, comes along with being a free thinker. I used to use the term authentic thinking. Thinking for yourself, which is easy to say, but it is not often the case with people. Even with very high IQ people, they are trained in some program, so they are extremely good. But do they think? They don't. Thinking in the way I'm defining it, original thinking, authentic thinking, truly original, truly authentic, and truly creative thinking is not running the program. And it is not easy. But you see, to be a polymathy and to be a free thinker, they go together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when group of free thinkers come together, do you know what happens? They disagree. There was a man named Eric Hoffer who wrote a book called The True Believer, a good book to read. He was another one of those autodidact. He said, disagreement is the beginning of thinking.
Yeah.
Not only the disagreement with others, but with yourself. And I actually wrote a small essay called, something to do with disagreement. But you see, most people, when we look at people disagreeing, they're not really disagreeing. You see, in order for you to disagree with somebody, you need to understand the other person's point of view to begin with. Otherwise, there's no disagreement, yes? You need to understand. In most cases, what we see this disagreement is, it actually a monologue. You misunderstand somebody's thought, and you are disagreeing with what you misunderstood. So there's no disagreement. There's a two-way monologue. There's no dialogue and there's no disagreement. He is agreeing with himself and she is agreeing with herself. They appear to be disagreeing with each other. So the free thinking, polymathy, and this real disagreement. Of course, there are agreement too, but disagreement, freedom to disagree, and being able to carry on a conversation in the face of disagreement is essential. For this reason, I wrote an essay called Alignment Beyond Agreement. When your association is based on the agreement, the moment there's a disagreement, even if it's a true disagreement, that's the end of the association. Alignment, if you align in search of truth, then disagreement is an asset.
Good point.
An original scientific enterprise was designed in that way. Scientific method is a way of disagreeing. At least checking other person's thesis. Yes.
Yeah.
And so your theory has to be amenable for testing and falsification. So there's you can say, basic agreement to disagree. And they are aligned in search of truth, greater and greater truth, or better and better theory. There's no alignment there. So alignment is alignment in congruence and intention. And agreement is a congruence in opinion. And so long as you value truth and alignment, there too, over your and other people's opinions, you can create a beautiful community. Yeah. That's another thing. Also, polymathic people need to develop philosophy of life, which include cosmology, which is conducive to their own evolution as an authentic self and authentic, unique polymath. Yeah. So if you have a belief system or philosophical system which you inherited from society, which is anti-authenticity and anti-polymathy, you will have an ongoing internal conflict because you are living a philosophy which is misaligned with who you are. So in that sense, everybody needs to be a philosopher.
Mm.
And in that sense, curiously, in that sense, when they develop a philosophy for themselves, which is conducive to their own authentic evolution, there is an alignment or even agreement amongst people in terms of philosophy. There will be minor differences in the in the details. So going back to the founders of this country, United States. So many of those people, virtually everybody, was polymath. Biggest number of founding fathers and framers are medical doctors. They didn't have any medical school then. So they learned to become doctor. After killing few people, they learned how to not to kill them. More people still die than survive. But anyway, so there are scientists and philosophers and lawyers and statesmen. There's enormous variety of people there. But when they look at their philosophy, they're pretty much aligned. Today, we call their philosophy as deism, which is very close to what we call pantheism. And majority of founding fathers are philosophically in the minority. And they are called by the rest of the population as infidels, heretics, atheists. Nobody was atheist, but they were called atheist. They had a different concept of God from the Christian Orthodox concept. So, if you count the people, official signers of Constitution and Declaration, plus those people who didn't sign, but they are involved, probably there are about 300 people, 300 out of 3 million who actually changed the course of history. 300. All free thinkers, polymath, aligned in their intention to create new nation. And they disagreed vigorously. Alexander Hamilton and James Madison came together to write the Federalist paper, but no sooner they finished it than they separated because they disagreed.
Yasuhiko, I probably have time for one more question, and then I'm going to let Shrikant ask some questions too. But I guess my last question will be, so one of the things I remember you talked about in your seminar, and it stuck with me all these years, is that we're born to our parents. We have a certain genetic inheritance. We're born in a certain time, in a certain place, and we get that stuff. Who knows if we had any say? Who knows if we had any say over any of that? Probably not. Maybe, who knows? But at the end, I remember you talking about the concept of giving birth to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it has occurred to me, like, how is one to give a true birth to their most authentic, best self,
Mm-hmm.
unless they explore the breadth of what is available to them, unless they have versatility in their humanity? How can they really give birth to their fullest self? So for me, when I think of really stepping into myself consciously, purposefully, with intent, writing my own story instead of inheriting the program that you talked about, it occurs to me that having breadth and depth, but breadth of experience is critical. If I'm going to author my own story, how can I really be my best self unless I have a big toolkit and lots of exposure and lots of learning? How can I be my best self if I let myself be a cog in the wheel? I don't want to be a cog in a wheel. I don't want to exist in a box. I don't want to exist in one silo. I'm curious what you think of that. Can you just sort of give some of your thoughts about the importance of variety in that giving birth to your best self, yourself process?
So we are all born, yes, once.
Yeah.
And most people die. And few people give birth to themselves. Again. But it's not really again in the sense of repeating, anew. So when you study those people who have given birth to themselves, the experience begins, the youngest, around the age of 28. And there's a book called Cosmic Consciousness by Richard Bach, which was written in the beginning of 20th century, actually published in 1900. And he died a few days later. He studied the many enlightened people. And he found out most of them get enlightened. Most of them give birth to themselves, rebirth to themselves around the age of 35. Well, Christ was 30 years old, maybe. Buddha was 35, and so on and so forth. And oldest was in that book, oldest was Emanuel Swedenborg at the age of 56. And in my own life, yeah, between 26 and 36, around that time, I really came to be who I am. I had an insight when I was 16, too early. It was the beginning of the right course, but blossoming. So what happens? Number one, you need to really wanting to live as you. You need to value yourself beyond your social status. You need to have a purpose in life, which is larger than just succeeding in life. Something
According to someone else's standards.
According to someone else's standards. So what it requires is a true self-honesty. If you are really honest with yourself, look at your life. There are areas you have some suffering. And where there is suffering and pain, I'm not talking about minor physical pain, but real like a spiritual pain, then you know there is something in you that is crying out to be acknowledged and to give them space to be. To me, in an ideal society, I don't know when, people will become enlightened in a natural process of growth. Until then, we need to really be true to oneself, be honest with oneself, and really wanting to be who we are. You can never exhaust your potential. If you asked, Da Vinci, did you fulfill all of your potential? And he said, no, I just scratched my surface. So potential, but you see, there's a life of fulfilling this potential, as opposed to living something else.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah. It just occurred to me, I mean, I can't imagine the regret I would feel if I reached the end of my life or near the end of my life and felt like I was never really myself, or that I left things undone, unexplored, unlearned, regrets. So for me anyway, and I think for you, Yasuhiko, too, exploring one's polymathy is a way to not only reach your fullest potential, but to avoid regret. Like I lived this whole lifetime as somebody that I was a program and not even really me. What was the point of it all if it wasn't really me?
Yes. Yeah. In my website, there's a number of articles, but one is called the Seek the Question or something like that titled. And you see, people always seeking for answers. No, you need to pay attention to the questions that you're actually asking. That is a pathway to your authentic self. Really. There's something you are asking, and you begin to live your life as a quest.
Yes.
Evolution quest.
I love that.
And one of my Facebook quotes says, smartest person on the planet is the person who has the most number of questions. Yeah. We value too much of those people who have answers. No, we want to really seek good questions, authentic questions that's coming from within. And some questions you may never be able to answer. Really. I have a few questions in life that I haven't answered yet.
You still have a lot of time left, Yasuhiko. I know you're going to live to be at least 100 and to contribute, to make lots of contributions in this planet. So you have plenty of time to learn.
Thank you very much. Maybe I can answer all questions.
Oh gosh, there have been so many gems that you have stated here, folks, that you're watching this live or on the replay. I hope you've gotten as much out of this as I have. We've already been going for an hour, so I want to be sensitive to that. Shrikant, I know you would like to ask some questions of Yasuhiko. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Wonderful. Yes, please. Thank you, Angela, for bringing Yasuhiko here. And Yasuhiko, this is just incredible pleasure and incredible honor.
Thank you.
And so I have 10 things I want to talk to you about it. I don't think we can go through all of them, but I want to list all the 10 things I want to talk to you, and then pick, I think, at most two. That I want to actually talk about, because I want to give chance there are some incredible people here, and I want to give chance for them to ask you questions as well. Okay, so the 10 things in the reverse order. Okay, I want to talk about the philosophy of our group and how we have managed to bridge kind of individuality and learning from each other together, and manage to do this regardless of disagreement, how we've done that. I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Second, I like your quote that everybody is a philosopher, and the idea of kind of that you have to kind of reborn, kind of rebirth yourself in order to proceed. That was the second one. Third one is, again, connected with that, is courage to be yourself. It's very simple saying, you just have to have courage to be yourself. It's a very profound point. I want to talk to you about Beethoven. Beethoven, yes. He's one of my favorites. And I think he epitomizes how you can take something like music to a completely new level. One human being can do that. I want to pursue on Buckminster Fuller. We've spent a number of meetups. We have done 10 different meetups on Buckminster Fuller. We've got the person who is the head of the Synergetic Society lecturing here. So Buckminster Fuller is one of my favorites. He also talks about, don't keep track. Like he talks about education as not saying what did you get right, but how many times you figured out that you were wrong and corrected it, and grading yourself on that. So that's one thing I want to talk about. Next one is about founding fathers and the idea of a pluribus unum, that one out of many. How did they manage to do that? Because people sweep under the rug the differences, but it is the kind of commonality of purpose. What thoughtfulness with commonality of purpose can bridge in the most difficult situation. I think it's a great example of that. I'm a big fan of Spinoza. So I want to talk about the pantheist approach, how on one hand it is atheist. He was called atheist. On the other hand, people call him the most God intoxicated philosopher, how it is true at the same time. And that's kind of the base for founding fathers as well. And I want to talk about Carl Jung and his idea of self and individuation. So these are the few things that came out from you. So but I don't want to talk about all of them because I want to give chance for other people to ask you questions, but I hope to continue the conversation. I want to start with the group because actually when I started the group, I struggled with this. I live in New York and we run a public group in a public space. Anybody can show up. I'm interested in deep conversation, real deep conversation, authentic conversation. So what the phrase I used was, because I had to explain to everybody who showed up what we were doing. And I called it joint exploration of the world, ourselves, and ideas. So it's a joint exploration. You are doing the exploration yourself as a sacred individual pursuit. I'm doing the same thing. This other person is doing the same thing. We are getting together so we can do this more jointly because we can learn from each other. We can learn. So it's along the same lines that you were thinking, that you've been talking about. And it has worked beautifully. Because on one hand, we have people who are Republicans and Democrats. We have people who are religious people, atheist people. And once they establish this foundation, that each of us individually is trying their best to understand the world, and truth is all that matters to them about the world, about themselves, they actually regard correction as being of tremendous value being offered to you. It is like you have to be full of gratitude if somebody shows you that you're wrong. So I very much identify with that. So I just wanted to let you know that. So any thoughts about that?
I say opinions and ideologies divide, and quest and commitment unite. Beautiful. And you have brought people together based on the quest and questioning. And so long as we stay in that, yes, we will individually and collectively evolve. Beautiful, beautiful. Something that you have accomplished. That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. And so that's it. It speaks exactly to, because I've been going through your website, trying to understand everything, because it's a very powerful kind of range of thought. It's very unusual because it spans kind of Japanese, Chinese, Indian, and the Western tradition. And you have kind of deep insights across the board. You talked about envy, you talked about the idea that we are not thinking, what exactly is thinking? So at so many different levels, right? You're breaking new ground. So it's fantastic. So I want to talk just maybe about one thing. Let me just see what the time is, because I want to make sure I'm very cognizant of the fact that I have to give time to people. I want to talk to you about Beethoven, but I will keep that for the end. That will be a good finale. You see, I'm very much, I'm very much aware about the pace of it. Just like in the Beethoven symphony, right? Let me just say one thing here. My favorite symphony by Beethoven, I love Beethoven. It's Fifth Symphony. And Fifth Symphony, I listened to it so many times that I can sing. At one point, I could sing the whole thing. Not all the instruments, but all the main line I could sing. Okay. And that actually gives you a blueprint of what a struggle is. Like, for example, at 16, right? You said no to what was around you. So that is that state. ba 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 bum. So it's like, I will do that. You don't know exactly how will you do it at that point, right? It is a hymn. It is a declaration of saying, this I need to do. And then the second symphony is all about the trouble that you're going to, second movement is all kinds of trouble that you're going to face. But what about this? But what about this? And how will this happen? And all the things come together. In third movement, you start to move up, but you start moving up and then you fall down again. You start moving up. Oh, that looks like it's really going to work. But no, it did not work. So there is this struggle. Okay, so you have to go through, you firstly have to have a direction of saying, I will do that. You're going to, as Carl Jung says, through in the filth, it will be found. You have to go through a dark period because you have to face all the things that people refuse to face, to go beyond that. And then the progress is always kind of, some progress, some back. And then you have the finale. Now, finale, where it's triumphant finale. But the most important point is the one you made, is that after that, Beethoven is Beethoven. Yes, there are struggles, but you kind of have your philosophy worked out. You have a lot to learn, and you always have a lot to learn, but there is Beethoven at the end of that. So I just wanted to, go ahead.
My most favorite is number 7.
Yes.
But we'll talk about that some other time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wonderful. So this has been incredible honor, and I hope to talk to you about all the other points at another time, but let me give a chance for people to ask questions. So folks, rules we have are the same as always. Yasuhiko, these 4 rules I've had for 5 years. They work beautifully. Number 1, you have to raise your hand in Zoom or type an exclamation mark in chat in order to speak. Number 2, keep on topic. Number 3, be brief. There's a lot of people who have incredible amount of things to say, incredible questions. Focus on questions this time. And 4th, most importantly, speak your mind. Feel free to disagree with anybody on anything and do so courteously. All right, so those are the rules. So we're going to start with Laura, Tom, give me just a second. It's going to be Laura, Tom, Jean, and Barry. Laura, what's your question?
Let me close the curtain.
Oh, sure. Take your time. Looks like Laura is not there. Next up is Tom. Tom, go ahead.
Okay, but Yasuhiko, thank you.
Hello.
I have had time to review your website and your ideas, so I'm very interested. My question, you are clearly about aligning people, their visions, and you're worried that people don't have good enough vision and objectives. This is an area that interests me greatly. I believe that visions and objectives should be quantified or at least completely clear and unambiguous. Do you have any remarks on that?
We can talk about alignment in many different levels. I do have a consulting program called Alignment Beyond Agreement that I do in the companies. In which case, company has its own purpose, and each person, has his or her own purpose, and they will self-reflect and re-examine what they think is their purpose. And in the process, they become clear again as to what they are committed to. And that's one level. And in the larger level of human life, the bottom line is the most fundamental sense. Humans are aligned in their vision, which is actually evolutionary vision, will to power. They want to be happy. So the process of this alignment beyond agreement, as you said so clearly, it involves a self-reflection, self-examination, and articulation and clarity as to what it is that one is actually committed to, vision, a mission, and it is a very important process. Most people don't know. They think they know, they don't know. So it is examination process. You know, what do philosophers do? They actually examine the assumptions. They think about thinking. So that's, I don't know. So I do agree with you. It's completely. It is extremely important to become clear, and what people think their visions are, not necessarily authentic, true vision that they have. Usually, it is something that was given to them by their family and society. Yes.
Thank you. Next up is
I'm
Laura.
ready. Yeah.
Laura, go ahead. What's your
Okay.
question?
Do you have a rubric for evaluating these so that so that you determine what kind of things you have to determine their difference, their similarities, their worthiness or whatever?
I don't know if I understand your question clearly. Evaluating what?
I'm not getting the word in my mouth right now.
That's fine. Laura, why don't you write down the question and you can ask again, okay?
And
Next up is going to be Jean, Barry, Kevin, and Sarika. Jean.
Yeah, so from my personal experience, I really see how school is not really teaching kids to be individualized. And actually my younger son, who is more, they call it spirit kids. I'm reading a book called Spirit Kids. He's very sensitive, have his own idea, and make it very hard to go through the public school system. And actually I realized, to any society, it's not benefit for society to have critical thinker. And I think that education should teach kids critical thinking, problem solving. But I realize if everybody have independent thinking, then it's much harder to manage. So it seems the public school is teaching the follower. Maybe private school, they're trying to foster leaders. So it's like what do we do with this system, especially with union control the education, is even harder to do any reform. So just wonder in this dilemma, with the parents who really, especially have kids who's more individualized, what do you do with them? Besides homeschool, I don't really have the energy to do it. So I have to put them in private school for now, but it's like, what we do is like, we have to counter the system to help our kids preserve their individuality. It's such a hard work. I have to constant meeting with the teacher and try to, fight back, to give them a voice, to preserve their difference. They want every kids, following be the same. It's such a hard job as a parent.
You see, the existing public education system was established in the beginning of the 20th century with an intention to collectivize people, children. And so they have been extremely successful in doing that. Now, to change this, that's a huge challenge. And in my view, where you can start is where you are. And each parents need to take upon their kids' education on their hands. So in your case, you are homeschooling, and I have met many people who are homeschooling. And then you can, if you have extra energy, you want to look around in your community and find a way to create a better system within your community. This is a distributed, decentralized, what I call omnicentric approach. Until we cannot wait. You see, we cannot wait for having good politicians occupying positions in the government to change the system. So that is the only way that we can do, in my view. So where you are doing the right thing. And the second thing is, when I lived in California, there are parents who are homeschooling their kids, created a community. they actually helped each other, which actually expanded into England. So homeschooling parents in England and homeschooling parents in California, and some are actually in Canada, they had a networking group and they actually helped each other. So that's maybe where you can start.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is going to be Barry, Kevin, Sarika, Judith, and Maritza. Barry, what's your question?
I was writing down my question, so I have two questions, but I'm going to integrate them into one question. And forgive me for my poor Japanese, but how do you perform uchi soto and as an authentic polymath when you're dealing with bullies?
Dealing with what?
Dealing with bullies.
Bullets.
People that so you're in a group but you're not part of the group. That's what uchi soto is, isn't it? That you're an outsider, but you're inside it. And so I am 78 years old. I have not figured out how to do that. It makes me angry when I'm bullied. And often I find myself walking away from that and finding another group. That's how I found this group. Is I've written 2 books and I was in a writer's group, and they kept calling, and one guy said, "I don't want you around, you're a genius." And I don't, and so I left the group. Is that the answer? Or is the answer, how do you not get angry? And it's and I think there's a word, it's uchi soto, isn't it, in Japanese? Go ahead.
Is inward or inside, and soto is outside. First, given the way the society exists today, we need to be ready to accept that we are outsiders. We are minorities, number one. So in that sense, you are, wherever you are, in the most fundamental sense, you are an outsider. And actually it is, I feel blessed that I'm an outsider because I can enjoy my life maybe much better than being an insider. So even when I'm in the system, working within the system, I'm not of it, number one. And number two, this is very important. Shrikanth will love this. So Buckminster Fuller defines universe as the aggregate of all humanities consciously apprehended and communicated, non-simultaneous and only partially overlapping experiences, which means universe is an abstraction and story, number one. And you are a universe, which is a part of this aggregate. So when you and I die, a universe disappears. My universe and your universe disappear. Or you as a universe disappear. And I as a universe disappear. And this universe has never been in existence before and will never exist again. This is another way of talking about monad. So your world, or whole of your experience, nobody can experience. You shows up in my experience and I show up in your experience, but you don't experience my experience, my universe as experience, and I don't experience you as an experience, and your experience, your universe, your world. This is a once in the history of entire universe. You as a world, you as a universe has never, ever, ever taken place before and never will take place again. Yes, singular cosmic destiny. And in that universe, everything shows up. You show up, me. So monad has no windows, which means I cannot experience your experience. However, you showing up in my world, you can be a portal for me to to enter in your experience in a very unique way. And you enrich me if I do that. And if I show up in your universe or in your world as a portal through which you can experience my world and my universe. So once we have that ongoing experience of being a universe, everything and everybody shows up as portals. So those people who are not nice to you, those people who don't understand you, whatever, they are a portal into their world. And you get to experience them if you relate to them that way. So in the ordinary sense, you and I are outsiders. We'll, at least some aspect of us will be always outsiders. But we can be in their world by making them show up in our world as portals. Then, you don't get angry. I actually, start to have an experience. And to be very honest with you, many people's lives are very sad. Even those people who are really nasty to you, you really experience their world. It is very sad, They don't need to be that way, but somehow they're that way. So there is an element of compassion. So that may be the way to free yourself from this anger and enjoy your life. And you see, you are enjoying your universe on behalf of the rest of us, because we cannot experience the universe.
Wow. Wow. Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Kevin. Kevin, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I agree with you. Say the nature is God in the Taoism. You've been like from Japan, know the Chinese, Korea culture, also been a Indian, then the U.S. Western culture. I would consider yourself as a polymathic philosopher. So might come up two questions. What's a culture shock from you, from culture to culture, and different philosopher perspective? Another, did you find anything in common in philosophy? The last one is yourself. I'm curious about what question you haven't answered. Would you share one or two? Thank you.
Well, you can always find similarities and differences in cultures. Even the Japanese and Korean and Chinese cultures are different. We use ginger and Chinese use garlic. And the Koreans use pepper. I'm just joking, but there's a lot of differences. And to me, how can I say this? They exist in my consciousness as they are different. And then when I think about something, they come together to my mind, they formulate a thought. So I'm informed by those different cultures and different philosophies. And I don't necessarily, always seek the similarities on them. Let them be there and understand them as much as I can. And when that understanding come together when I'm thinking about something. And I noticed that based on the subject, maybe I'm under the influence of one philosophy over the other. Like Buddhism, even Buddhism and Hinduism, well, Hinduism is like a universe. I mean, it contains everything. It is not just one mode of thinking. And Buddhism is a little smaller, but still is a universe. So those universes exist in my consciousness based on the study I have done. And they come together only when I'm thinking. Otherwise, I appreciate the difference. Just like I appreciate Mozart and Beethoven and Bach, I don't think about the similarity, similarity too much. if I'm answering your question. So understanding is important. But if we want to talk about each philosophy in an academic sense, yeah, Spinoza's philosophy is very similar to, Bruno's. Bruno's is very similar to Epicurus, which is very similar to Lao Tzu, and so on and so forth. And I like those people. They are my favorite philosophers, actually. And Spinoza, I think, the greatest Western philosopher ever produced, in my view. Because he agrees with me. Just kidding. I agree with him, actually. He came back to me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Next up is Sarika, Judith, Maritza, and Laura. Sarika.
Hi, so kind of expanding upon what Kevin was just saying. I mean, I grew up living in Singapore for a few years, and so I was very lucky to travel around Southeast Asia and experience kind of the epicenter and locus of culture revolving around Asian superpowers, and then moving to New York City. New York City is like the Western world and Western superpowers as well. And like there's so many beautiful philosophies that come out of the East. And I'm trying my best to recall the parts of what you were saying about why you revered America so much. And I wanted to know, like, what kind of hope and promise do you see? Because I sometimes get the feeling, maybe it's the most recent times, that, the roots of colonialism in the world is something that I'm grappling with. There's so many beautiful philosophies.
Just a second. Sorry. Just a second. Okay. Sorry about that. There was somebody who had not unmuted his thing. Go ahead, Sarika. Okay, I don't know what happened to Sarika. Let's go ahead and give me a second. Okay, let's go to the next person. Next is Judith.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to just weigh in a little bit on that outsider thing, the being the outsider, and the idea that we're all outsiders because we each have a unique experience. We're a universe in ourselves. I love the way you said that. But I just feel that it just enhances the polymathic experience too. The more outsider you are by being exposed to different ideas and cultures, the more you can learn. So thinking about that too, with the homeschooling network that you were talking about, I think that, if in the future we had a kind of an education system where we did have students being exposed to other students who live in different ways, in different, across political, social, economic boundaries, exposed to each other and their ideas, they would be, more well-rounded, and that would chip away at that, what you were talking about, like being a cog in the wheel, and just like all your story is based off of whatever your family's told you or your small community. So I thought that, but I have a question for you. You were talking about, and I wish you would expand, giving birth to your best self, and that it usually happens at the age of 26, 36 for yourself, 35 for others. And, some of us are over 60 here. And wouldn't you say, though, it's like, it's a process, you evolve through your whole life, that you are giving birth to your best self? That would give me some hope,
Of course, it is a process, and it is not the best self. It is a authentic self, which is not the culturally conditioned mimetic self, but it is your innate uniqueness blossoming as itself, and it is a process. But some people never really has a beginning. People born and then just go being fully conditioned and programmed by the culture, and never have an opportunity to give themselves an opportunity to actually beget themselves, to give birth to themselves, and begin a journey of evolving as an authentic self beyond this culturally conditioned self. And once that happens, it is of course process. We can start that process anytime, all the way to the end of our lives. There's no end to this.
Can I add something as well regarding this conversation around outsiders? I just want to say that, as I interviewed polymathic people, I definitely heard from them that they feel like outsiders. They feel like it's difficult to fit in any particular group. They can kind of partially fit in lots of groups, but because they're so individuated with their unique combinations and zigzag paths throughout life, they may never find somebody. I mean, with that combination, like you said, Yasuhiko, we're all unique universes in our own experiences and never to be replicated in all of time and all of the universe or multiverse or whatever it is. So there's a kind of comfort that people who step into their polymathy need to grapple with getting comfortable with not fitting in. The best we can get is to be a community of outsiders or a community of polymathic people, a community of unique individuated selves. And for that to be the commonality, that our commonality is our uniqueness on our individual journeys, and we can sort of be together, brave, facing that in a very free, sort of self-expressing way. So being an outsider, yes, like be your own authentic, true polymathic self in all that multifaceted richness, and get comfortable with not fitting in, because you might not fit in, but that's how you're going to be your authentic self.
Thank you. Next up is Maritza, followed by Laura. Maritza.
Hey, I want to make one quick comment on what was just said, and then I have a question. I'll be as quick as possible. I just want to say I would say, I don't want to give just a slight different spin. If one considers oneself an outsider within every group one encounters, maybe it's just as simple as changing one's perspective. The freedom of not feeling like this is my group allows you to hop around, and you get the enrichment of momentarily being a part of several wildly diverse groups. Like, I find that if one is an outsider, one is more qualified, as it were, to float. So you can hop from, room to room, as it were, and okay, you might still be an outsider, but you can fit in for just the one little brief moment, enjoy the little bit time there, and then move on. So
you can participate. You can fully participate. Yeah.
Yes.
Participate.
Yeah, and
so that's what I was thinking.
This is kind of a superpower of polymathic people, is because they have this broad toolkit of exposure. They can fit in so many partially fit in anyway, in so many more environments with so many groups. It's kind of an enriching experience because you can find common ground. Also, it's not just fitting in a group, it's also you meet someone and you have a broad base of toolkits. You could find something to connect with. So it increases the kind of connectivity between individuals in the larger system because they have more ways to connect.
Yes, I just wanted to make that point. Sometimes it's just a matter of change in perspective. The question I have is, so you spoke, and I only had time to look at the 2 articles posted. I'm still digesting the second one, processing. A question about these concepts of, so the understanding versus knowledge. So I often, when I'm trying to have a very serious discussion with someone, I like to separate the 2 terms, because I feel like, especially ever increasingly in today's world, we get a little lost with knowledge, and we may fail to realize that what we're doing is just collecting knowledge as opposed to seeking understanding. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
By the way, one of the essays that Angela and Shrikant posted, the technology, art, and science of Homo Deus. I use the word ecstatics as a new terminology for outsiders. I like that one better than outsiders, you know, ecstatics, stand out. Anyway, we use language, you know, in a different context. And sometimes we may use the word knowledge in the way that we are using understanding. So having said that, if we want to differentiate two, you know the rules. Turn left, you know, when traffic rules. When you have you play games, you have rules. You have a knowledge of the rules. Chess rules. You understand principles that underline rules. And principles are universal. And rules are an application in particular situations of those principles. And understanding the principles requires something more than knowing rules. And today in the education system, one of the specializations downfall is that they know a lot of rules without understanding principles. You know, I don't know if Angela was there, but you know, oftentimes I ask people questions, you know, simple question. It is 2 o'clock in the morning. You are driving alone, nobody on the street, and you come to the stoplight, red, which is long red light. You look left, nobody. You right, nobody. You are sure nobody will come. In the 1 second, you are driving to the other end of the street. Would you cross the red light? My answer will be yes. Because the principle of driving is safety. And those rules of red and green are designed to, you know, design so that people can maintain that principle. So you may disagree with me, you know, if I know there is a police camera there, I will change my answer. But anyway, so there's a fundamental difference between principle and then rules. And to me, one way of differentiating between knowledge and understanding is we understand principles and we know rules.
Wonderful. Next up is Laura. Laura, do you have your question?
I have a question now.
Go ahead.
Okay, bear with me a minute. Okay, it seems to me from what my experience has been with not polymaths per se, but monologues, people who are educated in a discipline, people who are PhD level functioning people. I hate to say, but definitely feel somewhat superior to people who do not have such a level of education. And okay, so these people naturally probably fall into the, I know they fall into the family of polymaths. So that group, in my opinion, becomes what would be considered an elite group among, to differentiate among other people. So you have this group of elites, you know, and I've seen that these people are socially not very competent, you know. So when you talk about, you know, groups of people not being able to talk to each other, they don't do well socially. So, you know, that integration of different groups, I'm not sure how well that goes. So what you have in society then is this group of people, how well are they going to, I mean, then it becomes an elite group that doesn't interact necessarily among themselves well, but how are they going to interact with those who are not polymaths? So then we're back to the situation that we have currently of elites and non-elites. And, you know, it creates, you know, a situation where we have partisan, nonpartisan. So we're wrapped up in our current politic right now. So how do you avoid that?
Excellent question, Laura.
Okay, I finally got my question.
Excellent.
Well, that's why in the beginning I said there are two different ways of pursuing being a polymath. Pursuing being somebody, and pursuing being who you are. And those people who have become polymath by pursuing being who they are, they don't feel superior or inferior to other people. They have ceased to compare themselves with other humans because singularities cannot be compared. So those people will not be an elite in the way that you described. So that will be my answer. Beyond that, what is going to happen if so many people pursue this path? Probably society will get better and human consciousness will start to evolve more. So that's maybe my response. So the kind of a polymath network, a community that Shrikant and Angela are creating doesn't seems to be the kind of a elite seeking group. And that's why I think it's wonderful. But I understand absolutely, that can happen. So it is where we come from.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank
one
you.
of the things, can I just say too, one of the things I'm trying to do anyway, is to make polymathy more accessible, to make being polymathic for everybody, rather than only for the elite or the creative eminent geniuses. And it's why I sort of distinguish between being a polymath, like a Leonardo, versus being polymathic, because we can all lean into our polymathic nature if we so choose to give ourselves that freedom. And that is not just for the elite, that's for everybody.
Thank you. Next up is Kimberly. Kimberly?
Yep, I'm here. It's just a comment. I just agree with Maritza's comment that I network amongst multiple groups and part of multiple groups. And I got it from my mother. My mother told me when I was really young, she goes, Kim, it's okay to be different. That's what she told me. So I've been different my entire life, but I just accept it. That's who I am. You know?
Thank you for sharing that, Kim. It's kind of ironic. I've said this before. There's a sort of paradox about polymathy. For people who really step into their polymathic nature, become very unique, just like all the other polymaths are unique too. So we're all unique, but everyone being unique, we're all kind of in the same boat. You know what I mean? There's a kind of irony there.
Wonderful. All right. So I want to pursue on one thing by Buckminster Fuller. We have a couple of minutes. If nobody has a question, I'm going to go ahead and ask. One of the insights that Buckminster Fuller's, which I really love, Yasuhiko, is thinking of children. That, for a child, being polymathic is natural. See, I don't think of it as being polymathic. I simply think of it as being human. I simply think of it as being, what else? Like a child is just interested in the world. And whatever it sees, it's interested in. And that's how you should be. So in that sense, kind of saying, okay, just focus on this is a social construct that you don't have to buy. It's only if you buy that, then even polymathic is an issue. It's like, what do you think?
Yes.
I derive inspiration from children on this. Go ahead.
You remember Buckminster Fuller's famous statement, every child is born genius.
Exactly.
And the society de-geniusizes them.
Yes, school does that.
And to a degree, it is by design. The system doesn't want geniuses who think independently, critically. So, and he wrote a book in 1960s, I think, Education Automation. that's I mean, he was a total genius visionary, as we know. But that book is actually quite amazing. He proposes that in the future we use technology, internet technology. In 1960s, I'm using a contemporary terminology to say what he said. Basically, you study at home, whatever it is that you want to study, following the one's curiosity, using internet at home. So everybody can study at his or her pace, and based on his or her interest. Then use school for socialization. So study alone and socialize together. And with this internet culture, I think that has lots of promise. And it is not contradictory to homeschooling ideas and having a common ground where kids can come together and play. So in a way, this COVID lockdown situation has created necessity. At the same time, it can be a forerunner for the future. This particular situation is not very good for kids. But if we start to mix this individualized study and networking of children and parents and using school for socializing, playing together, we may have a different kind of educational system.
Very interesting. I mean, one of the things that I find is I think that being an immigrant has been a tremendous blessing for me.
Yes, me too.
What happens is that in India, right, wherever when I grew up there, everybody around me took all kinds of ideas about how you should be for granted, and everybody said, "Oh, this is what is normal." I come to America. There are also people think the same way, but what they consider to be normal is completely different. Right? So you realize that you have a choice. That it is apparent to you because you have this culture and you have this culture, and then you have a choice of saying, what is my culture? Or what is right for me? What do I think is right?
Yes.
And you develop that mentality. You bring that to everything. And I think you have lived in more cultures than I have. So I think that's a very powerful thing of being open to different experiences, different.
But also, when you listen to Western classical music and the Indian classical music, there are two different cultures. So you may be living in one place, but you are experiencing a different culture. So we continue today, we can really integrate many different cultures without ever leaving your home.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And also the food.
Oh, yes.
The difference between sushi and Indian curry.
Yes.
Is very different.
Wonderful, wonderful. Angela.
Yeah, I know we're getting close to time, and I just want to ask one more question before we wrap up, if that's okay. So a lot of the times when polymathy is discussed, I mean, the word means many learnings. And so a lot of time when we think about polymathy, it's sort of relegated to the intellectual realm. What can you learn? What information can you download? What can you get from a book or a class or that sort of thing? But in thinking about polymathy a bit more broadly, like, can you learn from experience? Can you learn from difficulty? Can you learn from cultures or the kinds of things that you were just talking about? And of course, the answer is yes. And so I'm wondering, Yasuhiko, as sort of a final thought, and also thinking about the importance of finding and exploring and revealing your authentic self and living a good life, kind of trying to achieve the life mastery or self-actualization, or at least headed in that direction. Can you say your thoughts on the importance of the full human experience, even outside books, classrooms, like the normal stuff we think of when we think of learning? what is the importance of learning outside the classroom, outside of homeschooling, outside of books, that kind of thing? What comes up for you?
Again, generally speaking, many people actually seem to agree on this. It may change. People start to have real wisdom around the age of 40, 42, they say. Why? Partly because of the range of experience that the people need to go through to have whatever it is that we call wisdom. So somebody at the age of 30 may have read more books than somebody at the age of 50. But somehow there is something about having lived for 50 years, experiencing life, that gives them something which is not possible at the age of 30. In my view, you have a wisdom of 30 years old, wisdom of 40 years old, but there is something about the wisdom of 40 years old that is different from wisdom of 30 years old. And that difference is not the amount of books you have read. It is an amount of experience you have had. You need to have had sufficient number of failures and mistakes and errors before you can even begin to have some wisdom. Speaking about Buckminster Fuller, he said he had never met any human being who had made more mistakes than he had. So he was basically saying he is the wisest man on the planet. I wouldn't say that myself, but anyway, I have made enormous number of mistakes. So, and when mistakes all across, intellectual mistakes, existential mistakes, and all kinds of mistakes, relationship mistakes, career choice mistakes. We make all kinds of mistakes. And in one sense, everything's a mistake. If we have a perfection as a standard, nothing we do is perfect. And from there, we begin to learn. So yes, I agree with you completely. And so again, courage to live. And you need to be able to make sufficient number of mistakes and errors in order for you to gain wisdom. So you want to choose every day, what mistake can I make today? What error can I make today? What new things I can try?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in that sense, yes, I agree. But again, courage.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mastery of your fear and mastery of also the overcoming of apathy. Courage. Yeah, we get lazy. Now you have a PhD, you have a wonderful job. I mean, people respect you, and I have written books. Now, what's the next challenge?
Yes, continual growth.
Yeah,
continual
exactly.
Learning.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yasuhiko, this was fantastic. So any last thoughts, Yasuhiko, for the audience?
Well, I'm extremely grateful that I had this opportunity. And hopefully that we'll meet again.
Yes.
Yes.
I hope so too.
Much. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you so much to Yasuhiko for coming. It's been such a delight. I hope everyone else enjoyed it as much as I did. In my opinion, Yasuhiko is one of the most influential thinkers I've encountered. And I hope you guys will, keep him on your radar, because he's a really, really deep thinker. A lot of good stuff coming from him, and already has posted on his website and all that good stuff. He's a really good person to keep on your radar. Thank you so much, Yasuhiko. And Shrikant, thank you so much for making this possible.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everyone.